In a city that never sleeps, legal issues can't wait. Michael Cohan and his tech-savvy team of lawyers are here to separate the signal from the noise and solve problems for every New Yorker in the hustle. This is Hustle and Law.
All right, everybody. Mike Cohan here on the Hustle and Law podcast. Our guest today is Brian Beckcom, injury attorney based in Houston, Texas. Brian, tell us how it all started. How did we get here?
Well, I was well, I don't want to quote the movie The Jerk. I was about to quote it, but nowadays that's probably politically incorrect. But I don't know how far you want to go back, but I can tell you that I have zero lawyers in the Beckcom family. As far as I can trace back my mother's side, my father's side. I was an athlete. I was a jock growing up, and I wanted to play sports. I went to Texas A&M and played basketball my first year, and that's really all I thought about. I started studying computer science just because, and this is in the early 90s, I thought computers were cool. Didn't realize I was going to have to take a bunch of math classes like calculus and linear algebra and differential equations and all that stuff, but I really, really like computers. And but after 4 years sitting in a computer lab with a bunch of dorks, I decided that I wanted to go do something different. And so I tell people, they're always like, computer science and philosophy, how'd you end up at law school? And I say, well, I didn't want to spend my whole life behind a computer screen with a bunch of dorks. Well, what do I do now, 25 years later? Sit behind a computer screen with a bunch of nerds. But I'll tell you what really, to me, and this is probably by and large subconscious for most of my life, but when I was 10 and my brother was 8, my mother died, and her death was the result of some very, very serious medical malpractice by an Air Force doctor. My dad sued the United States Air Force, won the case. You can look it up, Beckcom versus the United States of America. And it wasn't a lot of money, as I'm sure you know, suing the federal government is pretty difficult, and they have caps and things like that. But in any event, that lawsuit helped me and my brother go to college and me go to law school without racking up a bunch of debt. So I go to law school at the University of Texas after going to Texas A&M. Everybody at the University of Texas who makes good grades goes to these big defense firms. I didn't know any better. So what do I do out of law school? I go to a firm called Fulbright and Jaworski, which at the time was the biggest law firm in Texas. Leon Jaworski, for people that are interested in the historical part of this, was one of the Watergate prosecutors. He prosecuted Richard Nixon. But anyway, I go to this huge firm. I'm representing these huge Fortune 500 companies, these big insurance companies. I have this case, and I'm defending this plumbing company. This poor black kid who was a plumber had fallen off a roof and hurting himself. And I thought I was going to go in there and win this case for the roofing company, and I got my butt kicked in. And I remember when I was giving this guy the check, his name was Eric LeGrone. I'll never forget that. I actually was happy that I was giving him a check. And I thought to myself, man, I'm on the wrong side of the docket. And so I switched from the defense side to the plaintiff side about 25 years ago, and I've done nothing but personal injury contingency work since then, personal injury and wrongful death. And I think part of the thing that really drives me is there was a lawyer when I was a young kid who helped my family, and now I get to do the same thing for other families. So I tell people, I think, and this sounds corny, maybe a little bit, but I tell people that I kind of feel like I'm doing exactly what I was put on the earth to do right now, at least in terms of my law practice. So that's kind of the long version, I guess.
We've talked about it on the cast before, on previous episodes with previous guests. What do you think the characteristics of being a collegiate athlete or being into sports, how do you think that has translated into your law practice, if at all?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I tell people, and so they didn't call it this 25 years ago, but I was a preferred walk-on, which means I didn't have to try out. I was on the team. I just didn't have a scholarship, and I would have ultimately earned a scholarship. So there's a difference between being somebody like me who was a preferred walk-on and like being the star of the team. But there's some similarities too. And one of the similarities is I've had 3 kids. I've coached them all in sports. I've been around a lot of parents that have coached and been fans. And I think every parent I know, by the time their kid is 3 years old, thinks they're going to play college sports, at least if they're involved in sports, right? And people that have played college sports knows, first of all, that is really, really unlikely. And it's not just unlikely because your kid probably isn't good enough, but it's also unlikely because he or she probably won't want to. And if you want to play college sports, you really, really have to love the sport, because college sports is not like high school sports. It's not like youth sports. It's a business, and was a business 30 years ago. I mean, it's a full-time job. So you have to have a ton of passion for the sport. Bill Belichick has a saying that I think is a great saying. He said he likes to hire football coaches that play Division III football, because if you play Division III football, you really, really, really like football, right? And the other thing I'll say is, and I see this oftentimes, sometimes people make decisions, and I say people, I'm talking about parents. They'll push their kids to go play college sport at some college that they would never in a million years choose to go to, if not for that sport. I had the same options. I had tons of options to go play basketball at junior colleges, Division I schools. I could have played at Oklahoma State under Eddie Sutton. But I chose the school I wanted to go to first, because I knew I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. And I think people make really bad, I see this all the time. Kids go to junior colleges, or they go to colleges I've never heard of. Oh, look at this. Little Johnny signed with East Tennessee Technical State College to play lacrosse. And then in 6 months, little Johnny is at Texas A&M University, or he's back at the University of Michigan, or she is. And that's because I think the college experience is about more than sports. So again, it's different if you want to play professionally. If you want to play professionally, that's a little bit different. But I think the number one thing you have to do is you have to have as a college athlete is you have to be really mentally tough. I mean, I'll just give you one quick example. When I was playing basketball my freshman year, I lived in a huge, it wasn't a dorm on campus, but it's basically a huge hotel, but it was for students, called University Tower. About 600 students there. Well, over the holidays, the Christmas holidays, there was one student there, and it was me. And that's because it was basketball season. And I had to stay there throughout the entire Christmas break by myself. And that's a big time sacrifice. So people don't think about, the
dedication,
the dedication it takes. The dedication it takes.
And that's almost like a parallel with litigation and what we're doing. First of all, the competitiveness. Do you feel the same rush? Do you feel the same energy that you used to in a sports competition than you do now when you're on trial or at a high stakes deposition? Do you still feel that energy?
That's why I do what I do, at least in part. Yeah. It's like I'm searching for that adrenaline. I mean, I played in front of 20,000 people in high school and in college, and the only way I've been able to, there's two ways I've been able to recreate that rush in my adult life: trial and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions. But yeah, I absolutely, it's very, very similar. And that's,
you think that separates you? You think that separates you from maybe some other PI attorneys that are in your market?
Yeah, I think it could. What I really think separates me the most is I'm the most persistent person you'll ever meet in your life. Like, you can beat me, but you'll never make me quit. And that, if you know you're going against somebody that will absolutely never give up, then that's a pretty formidable opponent. But yeah, the mentality of being an athlete and being competitive, playing college sports and stuff like that, for sure helps me in trial.
And the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, are you actually fighting and competing, or it's just training?
No, I've competed, and I roll on Saturdays. I roll with young Brazilian black belts who are national world champions. So for example, I roll against Pedro Moreno, who's the number one guy in his weight class in the world. One of my good friends is a guy named Enrique Camargo, who's the number one guy in his division. So I don't do things half-ass. You know what I mean? If I'm going to do it. Now, you'd be stupid. Anybody who goes into a jiu-jitsu or any martial arts or any fitness program, quite frankly, CrossFit, you name it, and goes full speed every time is an idiot, right? That's not the point. What you want to do is you want to build up. So I don't go full speed all the time. But yeah, man, I'm in there competing with the best in the world. And I've also competed in some IBJJF's the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Foundation. There's different governing bodies, but I've competed in some formal tournaments as well. I'm thinking about competing in the World Championships in Las Vegas this year.
You think it keeps you going?
Yeah.
I think it keeps you young as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you're 51 years old and you're training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 5 times a week against 25-year-old Brazilian black belts, yeah, you better take good care of yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And as the years go on, it doesn't get any easier.
No.
It doesn't get any easier to keep up.
Although I will tell you this,
No.
I will tell you this. I hear that a lot, and I think that can be true, and it is true for a lot of people, but it's not necessarily true. So I hear all my friends now saying, man, we're getting old. And every time they say that, I think in my brain, speak for yourself. I feel better today than I felt when I was 40 years old. And I have this theory that your body is real smart, right? So if you train your body not to do anything, it'll get very good at not doing anything. Whereas if you train your body to move and do stuff, it'll get really, really good at moving and doing stuff. And so, of course, when I started jiu-jitsu, I mean, it was very difficult. There's all these different biomechanical movements that I had never done before, and I was sore for a long time. But I tell you what, I see all these people joking about limping out of jiu-jitsu practice. I'm thinking to myself, you're not doing it right, man, because I walk out of jiu-jitsu practice and I feel terrific.
Energized, ready to go.
So good. Yeah, I feel terrific.
Yeah, I've got some years on you. I'm 37, and I have a lot of colleagues and neighbors and friends and acquaintances my age who they've already turned to tennis and golf.
Yeah.
And golf is one thing. There's a business aspect to it, but
Sure.
I can't get there. I'm not ready to I still want to work out. I still want to train. I still want to play sport at a high level.
Yeah, me too.
You still need that competitive edge to keep you going. And there's nothing better than a morning workout or a morning competition as well, because the rest of your day is downhill from there.
You know what I did right before this podcast, Michael? I carried a 40-pound weight vest with ankle weights up a half-mile incline at 7,000 feet, and then I pushed a sled, and then I did some weights, and then I took a shower, ate lunch, and got on this podcast. So I'm fortunate because my dad was an athlete.
Okay.
I saw my dad grow up working out literally every single day. He's 81 years old, and he uses a treadmill now, and he actually fell and busted his head wide open about 6 months ago. He was real concerned about it. And so you know what most people would do? They were 81 years old and that happened. They would make excuses to stop working out. That's what most people would do. You know what my dad did? He bought a football helmet with a face mask so he could continue to work out. And if he falls down, he's got some head protection. So that's the kind of.
So that's where you get your.
That's where I get my mentality from. Yeah.
That's where you get your persistence and your mentality.
Yeah, no doubt.
Is that your routine the morning before a big trial or a big hearing on a case as well? Or are you doing an intense workout?
I do a lighter workout on the mornings before trial because I always lose 5 or 10 pounds in trial. So I feel like I'm already getting some, it's like the adrenaline, all that stuff is kind of physically good for me. So the workouts, but I always work out in the morning beforehand, like you said, because it kind of clears my mind. It clears any nerves or anything I have. Yeah, but I do tone it down just a little bit during trial because I have to have the energy to get through trial.
Yeah, it's 100% the mental aspect of it, less than the physical. If you want to clear your head, you want to be ready to go.
Yeah.
You don't want that workout on your mind for the rest of the day.
That's right.
So it's downhill from there.
That's right.
Tell us how you started your firm.
Yeah, so I started my firm actually 20 years ago this year with a partner. His name's Vuk, V-U-K, Vuljasenovic, part Serbian, although he grew up in Houston, Texas. That's why we call the firm VB Attorneys, because Vuljasenovic and Beckcom is kind of hard to spell, but we were both big firms, and we met at a small plaintiffs firm. We were there for a very short period of time. Then we left 20 years ago and started our own firm, and it's been great. Like I said, this year's the 20th anniversary, and we've never been stronger as a firm.
What triggered you? What was there one moment where you met Vuk, or was there one, did the light bulb go off at one time, or was it over time that you developed the desire to go out on your own?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a eureka moment, but I will tell you there was a couple things that I was at this big firm for 2 years, and every single person that was my age got paid the same amount of money. It was like a ladder deal. And I remember looking around going, man, I'm going to get paid the same as this person, and I'm way, way better than this person. And this person is getting paid the same as me, and maybe they're better than me. And there was something about that seemed a little bit off to me. The other thing, quite frankly, is who can get motivated about representing an insurance company, right? I mean, like, nobody can get motivated doing that. And insurance companies, they're necessary evils, but they are, I don't know how somebody spends their whole life representing these damn pencil neck nerds that they have to deal with all the time that don't know anything about anything. And frankly, now at this point, a lot of the insurance people don't have any say-so either. It's like computer programs that decide what they can and can't do. So, to me, it was a combination of a lot of different things. I had a lot of confidence in my abilities. I knew I would be good at this. And one of the reasons I knew I would be good at this is because I would work really, 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 really hard. Nobody would outwork me. But I also just, one of the reasons I went to law school is to help people. I didn't go to law school to help some billion-dollar insurance company make an extra penny by withholding a legitimate claim. Like, that's not why I went to law school. So,
right.
Some people, I suppose, get really into representing insurance companies, but those people are weird. I mean, let's be honest.
What about the specifics of actually starting the business? Did you guys start working out of a coffee shop? Did any employees come with you? Did you hire anybody?
Yeah.
What were the specifics?
Vuk walked into my office when we were at this firm and said, "Hey, I'm leaving." And I said, "Yeah, I am too." And we looked at each other like, "Oh, cool." And Vuk said, "Why don't you leave first?" I said, "No, if I leave, you'll never leave." And so he left this firm. We were both at. I left a week later. We had no plans. We had no employees. We had no cases. We had no clients.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And a couple weeks later, I'm literally sitting around in my sweatpants growing a beard for 2 weeks, not working. And Vic and I went and had beers and, "Hey, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. What are you going to do?" "Hey, let's start a firm together." And it kind of went from there. So it took us 2 or 3 months to start up the firm. And when we first started the firm, it was me and him, one paralegal, 0 cases, and $100,000 line of credit that we got simply because we could sign the bank's loan papers. That's how we started. The first year, we made $0, and we used $98,000 of our line of credit on a case that we probably shouldn't have taken, that almost tanked us. And but then after that, it was, we were both persistent, and it was kind of off to the races after that.
Mm. How did you develop a culture at your firm over the past 20 years?
Yeah, good question. Probably the thing that did it the most was, believe it or not, a piece of technology called Slack. I don't know if you've ever heard of Slack, but we
use it.
Yeah, we put Slack in about 10 years ago, like right when Slack came out. And Slack is like a messaging board, and it's really hard to describe how effective it can be for a firm like mine until you use it. But essentially, all information is public unless you make it default. Everybody knows what everybody's doing, everybody's birthday, especially now when everybody's doing a lot of remote works. Slack has been a huge deal for the culture of our firm. The other thing I'll say is, it wasn't always like this, but everybody at our firm likes each other, and we don't really hire anybody unless everybody else approves. And if everybody, if we bring somebody on board and somebody says this person is not a good fit, then they're gone fairly quickly. Although I'll tell you, at this point, I'm sitting here thinking every single one of our employees we hadn't lost an employee in years. So, and I think that the third reason that our firm culture is good is because we truly do prioritize family over the firm, and we prioritize the employees over the clients. So a lot of lawyers will say, "What's the number one priority?" And they'll say, "The clients are the number one priority." Well, I'm sorry, that's bullshit. Okay. My number one priority is my employees. Clients come and go. And if a client, I don't care how good their case is, if they're rude to my staff and they continue to be that way, they're gone. So any lawyer that says my clients come first, I sit there and go, man, your staff must really love you when they hear you say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're out on Indeed.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
Exactly.
You're 98K in the hole 1 year in. What are you thinking? How are you sleeping?
Not too great, because I just bought a house and had my first kid that year too. So it's like complete and total cognitive dissonance. But here's the thing about it is I knew I had an honors law degree from the University of Texas, and I'd worked at a big firm, and I knew that if the law firm thing didn't work out, I could find a job somewhere else. It would not be the end of the world. So, I mean, there was plenty of sleepless nights, and have been, as I'm sure you know, over the years. Like, that never goes away. And, you think you get to the point where it's like, okay, now I can relax a little bit. Not only does that not happen, but that would suck, right? Like, our job is to solve problems. And so, it kind of, 5 or 10 years ago, I was sitting there going, God, is this going to get any easier? And I finally realized, well, I hope it doesn't, because if it gets easier, anybody can do it. And this is kind of what my job is to make tough decisions in difficult situations for people that really need me. And yeah, so.
What about your challenges from then and now? So obviously your personality shifts. I'm sure you become more business oriented as the years have gone by, but
Yeah.
How do you compare the challenges that you're facing 20 years in as opposed to the challenges 1 year in?
Yeah. The challenges initially were bringing cases in the door. The challenge now is swimming through all the cases that we get and making sure we have enough people to work the cases and developing relationships with other lawyers where we can refer out some of the smaller stuff. So nowadays it's like, my partner and I were literally talking about this morning. We get so many cases that we're starting to refer a fair amount of them out to other lawyers, but we got to make sure we have good relationships with these lawyers, because when we refer something out, we're basically telling the client, we can't do this, but we know somebody really good. So we're kind of vouching for that person. And so it's more of I'm more of a, at first I was doing all the work. Now I'm more like making sure that the right people are in the right seats to do the work.
Yeah. Tell us about your most high profile case. What was it about? What was your takeaway from it?
By far my most high profile case was the Captain Phillips case, which is when the Maersk, Alabama got hijacked by Somali pirates. All over the news, New York Times, Dateline, Nightline, Sunday Daily Telegram. That's still the #1 visited page on my website 15 years later. And it was quite an experience. I had no idea it was going to get as much publicity when I got the case. I had no idea Tom Hanks would star in a movie and Tom Hanks would be Captain Phillips, but all that happened. It was a great experience, actually. And we won the case, got a great settlement for the crew. But I had to battle this Hollywood publicity machine that was making Captain Phillips, who was the captain of the vessel that got hijacked, they were making Captain Phillips a hero. And he was just a complete idiot, to be quite honest with you. He was told not to go within a certain range of Somalia, and he took a shortcut to save fuel costs that was twice as close as he was told to go by like 5 or 6 different international maritime agencies. But the point is the perception was he was some sort of hero because there was a movie with Tom Hanks, and everybody loves Tom Hanks, right? But, I tell people after the movie came out, they're like, what did you think of the movie? I said, well, I love the movie, but kind of like Forrest Gump. I love Forrest Gump too, but they're both fiction. The only thing that was nonfiction about the Captain Phillips movie was there was a vessel taken over by Somali pirates, but the depiction of Captain Phillips as some sort of hero is not only not accurate, it's kind of the opposite. The crew actually performed most of the heroic acts. So, for example, the one pirate that lived when they did the perp walk in federal court in Indiana had an eye patch covering an injury because my unarmed crew, one of my crew members took a spoon and stabbed him in the eye. And so it was the crew that fought back. There's a scene in the movie where Captain Phillips says, "Don't take my crew, take me." That was completely made up, like completely made up. But anyway, that was by far my most famous case, and really kind of still is today, I guess. But we've had a bunch of cases in the news, so that's not been the only one.
How do you land high profile clients? Does it just happen? Are you marketing for it? How are you getting these cases?
I don't market for it per se, but at this point in my career, people know that I'm pretty good at these cases. I can tell you that I've handled some other fairly high profile cases where the client specifically wanted a lawyer with a little bit of discretion. And so I'm able to handle, like I've handled some high profile cases that nobody will ever know about. I handled a case, for example, for a star football player. He got arrested for something. I'm not going to say what it is, because if I do, it'll tip people off on who it was. But he got arrested for something, and I got hired, and you never heard about it ever again. That's because I took care of it. There are other lawyers that I compete with for these cases that would have blasted this all over creation. And so oftentimes high-profile clients want somebody that can blast things all over creation, which I can certainly do. But other times they want somebody with a little bit of discretion and a little bit of judgment. And so probably half the time I'm representing, quote, high-profile clients, it's because they don't want it to be a high-profile case. Like they want it to be a little more low-key. Maybe it's a situation where a lawsuit is not the right solution, and there's a better way to get what they want. So, but the point is, I don't actively market for high-profile cases. I have people seek me out just, I think, because of my track record.
I want to switch gears back to the technology aspect of it. I think it's a big topic of discussion. You mentioned that you were using Slack in your firm. I use Slack in my practice as well. I think it's a great tool. What about AI? Everybody's talking about AI this, AI that. Are there AI tools that you use?
Yes.
Do you think that they're effective? Yeah. Do you think that they're effective, and how fast do you think that they're going to permeate the industry to the point where people are replacing staff with AI?
All these are all great questions. We could do a whole podcast on this alone. I've been using AI for 2 years now. I used it kind of right when it came out. And when I say AI, I'm a little bit of a nerd because of my computer science background, but AI is a very, very broad term. And so there's artificial intelligence all around us right now. So for example, your thermostat is artificially intelligent because it can adjust the temperature in your room without you having to do anything. Okay. But that's a very narrow intelligence, a very narrow artificial intelligence. But anyway, it's all around us. And artificial general intelligence is what most people think about when they think about like computers being sentient. That's another category that we'll set to the side. When people talk about AI in the law, mainly what they're talking about is large language models or like ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is a form of a large language model. And basically it's the ability to generate video or words using artificial intelligence. That's the real game changer, or at least it's a game changer right now for the law. And I use that all the time. So for example, I'm drafting some discovery requests. I can draft discovery requests in 30 seconds. And I have to mess around with it because it's not perfect. But as far as an initial draft, large language models are fantastic. They're also good at generating ideas. So I had I represent a lot of people that work offshore in the maritime industry. And I have this defense that comes up again and again and again and again, which is basically where they say, it's your fault. You should have stopped the work if it was dangerous. So I have used large language models to come up with arguments to counter that common defense. I've also used AI a little bit in research, although it's not great with legal research. I mean, you have to check literally every single thing it says. And if you understand how it works under the hood, which I do, I could probably program a large language model if I had to, you realize why it's not quite as smart as people think it is. It kind of appears smarter than it is, but they have these things called hallucinations where they just make stuff up. And unless they change the algorithms, the way it works, it's basically just a prediction machine with some math built in. And predictions are wrong all the time. And so they're going to continue to be wrong. No matter how much data we have, they're going to continue to hallucinate. And we're going to have to continue to check them. I'll tell you the other thing is kind of funny. They're terrible at math unless you build in a math component to the LLM, because they're not programmed to do math. So there's all sorts of interesting issues as it relates to AI and stuff. But I think, at least in my business, AI is going to be a big deal. In the contract lawyer business, huge deal. I've been telling people contract lawyers aren't going to be contract lawyers for very long. They're going to be programmers, and they're going to be writing programs for what are called smart contracts. So I tell you one thing. Let me just finish this off. One thing I've learned as a science guy and a law guy is I don't make predictions. Predictions are a recipe for being wrong. So I don't know exactly how it's going to affect the law. I just know it will, and we need to be ready for it, if that makes sense.
Of course. Now that we're in the discussion of LLMs, it sounds like you've programmed your own GPTs. So you're able to do that. Have you used LLMs or created your own GPTs in responding to discovery? Because offensive is kind of, it fits into the definition of how you're defining AI.
Yeah.
It's predictive. It's great at first drafts. It's not so good at math. What about responding? Have you used it for responding to discovery? Have you, for instance, uploaded templates of, I don't know, medical records or a police report and said, hey, here's a discovery request, here's the information. Could you create something? And how far away do you think we are from that being mainstream of practice?
It's a great question. And I don't answer discovery and haven't for about 15 years, but I see what my staff does and what you could do. So at least in my line of work, half of the discovery questions you get in every single case. The other half are going to be different for every case. So, for example, name, address, social security number, that's going to be different every single time.
Right.
Describe your injuries. That's going to be different every time. What are your legal theories? Well, those are going to be similar every time. And so you could make a large language model that you could train on your data, and that's already coming. So I'll give you an example like your podcast, Michael. This is one thing I'm doing with my podcast is I'm feeding all 70 episodes of my podcast into an AI right now, and I'm training it on me and my podcasts and stuff like that, because I want it to be able to be useful. And that's the data set. You could do the same thing. You could upload all your discovery responses, all your discovery questions, and train it on the way that you answer discovery. And that would be a very effective use. You're still going to have somebody look at it, though, because our business is individual business. Now, on the flip side of that, I could see insurance companies, because all they care about is saving a nickel. I can see them, because they have the same thing every time, right? Essentially, really using it.
It's essentially by law firm for us.
Yeah.
Every law firm has their own templates.
Their little templates set up.
Defense firm.
Yeah, every defense, you got your way of doing things, and you could feed all of that work into an AI. I tell you, Slack's building AI in right now. And Slack, I'm sure, very quickly is going to build AI in that can scrub all your messages and all your files and stuff and kind of develop a personality. And this is kind of predictive of how Brian would answer this message. I actually had a guy on my podcast who builds individual AIs for people that you can install on your phone, and you never answer text messages. Like somebody texts you and it just answers for you, and it sounds like you. So, like I said, I don't know exactly what the future will hold. I just know it's going to be very different than it is today.
Are you training your staff to use any of these AI products to implement into the practice?
Yeah, no, they're the ones that use it. They're the ones that use it. And the way it works, this is the way it works in my firm. It probably works like this in a lot of firms. So there's a group of people that love new stuff, and there's a group of people that hate new stuff. And so me and my little group that likes trying new stuff, we kind of beta test it, and then we push it out to the firm. My partner, every idea I come with, he says it's a terrible idea. Every single one, and has for 20 years. I remember when I showed him the first iPad, he goes, "This thing is completely useless." That's now all he uses. But it's good because he forces me to justify some of my harebrained ideas, because I certainly come up with plenty of harebrained ideas. But so I train a small group, and it was the same thing with Slack. Like when I pushed Slack out to the firm about 10 years ago, there were people that didn't want to use it, and there were people that loved it. And for the people that didn't want to use it, it's kind of like there's one of two things you can do. You can either shut up and try something new and quit being a damn dinosaur, or you can leave, right? So sometimes you got to kind of really force people to adopt this sort of thing. But most of the time, I don't really have to do that because our little beta test group normally says, "This sucks, we don't want to do this." Or like I use Needles. Do you remember Needles? I used that like 15 years ago, and that was terrible. Like it was the worst piece of software I've ever seen. We wasted 6 months on that thing. But you know what? We really didn't waste 6 months. We learned something, and we learned that we would never use something like that again. So it wasn't a waste of time. But the point is, my firm at this point is pretty good at adopting technology fairly quickly.
So you have had those conversations with staff, like, listen, you've got to use this, or
yeah,
you got to find somewhere else to work.
No, it's my firm. Like you do the things the way I want you. Although I will say this, everybody has their own style of working. So I'm real open-minded about when you work, where you work, the particular methodologies by which you like to work. So for example, a lot of people like to read paper, and I'm like, cool, read as much, print it out, read paper, do as much as you can. So I as far as that goes, do it however you want. But in terms of the architecture of the firm and the platforms we use, like, I'm sorry, Michael, but nobody in my firm is allowed to use anything but a Mac product. You can't use a PC, you can't use an Android. And there's real specific technology reasons for that. And that is those platforms aren't secure. And I know you said you use a PC, but it's buggy, and so are Androids. And Macs are far more secure, and that's at an operating system standpoint. So I actually prohibit anything but iPhones, iPads, and Macs in my firm. But in terms of how you use the platform, everybody has a like, I'm not a morning person, so I like to work later in the evenings. My partner's a morning person. One of my lawyers I work with a lot is more of a morning person. Great. That's awesome. Frankly, I don't care if you're there 9 to 5. I don't care if you're there 5 to 9, as long as you get the work done. But in terms of the architecture and the basic fabric of the firm, I make people do it, in the way that Vic and I like them to do it.
That was good. That was an interesting trajectory we took.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Sure. Absolutely.
Until next time, New York, keep hustling. And we'll be right here to keep you one step ahead. Ready to talk to a lawyer today? Find us in the 5 boroughs at cohanlegal.com.